I was up doing a watch party last night, way, way later. Like the game started about my bedtime, but it's a win. It's a win, Nick.
Yeah.
And now it's a winning streak. That's 3 in a row and 2 on the road.
We mentioned on Monday when we kicked this whole thing off that you get the elusive and the sacred road victory in conference play so much earlier this year than you did a year ago. And I got to admit, when I was looking at the schedule, when it first rolled out, I remember looking at how they ended that little home stretch there, and you have the Illinois game. You're just coming off the road against Wisconsin, and then you go out on this West Coast swing. Now, I don't think anybody really projected Washington to be a powerhouse, but we knew Oregon would be good. Mm-hmm. This was an area of the schedule that I thought, gosh, if you can just somehow scrape by and have a little success, it seems to open itself up a little bit between Ohio State at home on Super Bowl Sunday and then having gosh, why am I blanking? Maryland coming back on Thursday, but both back-to-back home games. So if you can get through that West Coast swing, even splitting, I think you would be very, very happy. And all of a sudden, we're looking at this Nebraska basketball team with not one, but 2 wins on the road out in the West Coast with the travel, the lengthy travel and everything like that. So this was not only what it did for their resume, what it does for their record, but I think just being able to get that monkey off your back, so to speak, too, that, yeah, you can win on the road and you can go as far as the Big Ten's going to take you to win on the road.
4 true road wins this season now for Nebraska, because you got those 2 in the Pacific Northwest, which you're right. I think I even said it on Monday, and I know I've said it on the Nebrasketball Brunch Show, which you can hear here on the Husker Max YouTube page as well. Just split in the Pacific Northwest. Yeah. Just split. And you got the Oregon one. It's like, okay, that feels really good. You're not that hurt if you lose in Seattle, but to go get both of those, plus, remember, people forget, a win at Creighton, and because they took on Hawaii in the tournament out in Hawaii, that was a true road game. And that's a place that, what was it? It's been since like the 80s. Mm-hmm. Nebraska hadn't won out there. And I know there's only so many opportunities. It's not like they play there every year. But that's a tough thing to do. 4 true road wins for this team. 4 ranked wins for this team. Right now, because there was a thought experiment when Nebraska was on that 6-game slide of what if Nebraska loses the next 11 at the time. At that point, you were looking at, well, overall, the 3-year stretch, not that bad. Mm-hmm. Now with 3 straight wins, Fred Hoiberg and this Nebraska team have piled up 54 wins over the last 3 seasons, and there's a lot of this season left. That's the 8th best 3-year stretch since the beginning of the Danny Nee era. There are not many 3-year stretches better than what Nebraska is on right now in program history. I know there's all of the haven't won an NCAA tournament game, haven't won a lot of conference championships. Like, there's those things, absolutely. But this is still going really well for the Huskers. And with so much season left, Nick, a lot of people are saying Nebraska might be a lock at 19 wins. It might not have to get to that 20.
And that's the interesting thing about everything that they've done from the standpoint of conference wins and looking at those teams. Now, as we were all waiting for Nebraska and Washington to tip off and to get to our coverage of that game, we're all probably rooting for Illinois to pull that off against Rutgers on the road. I mean, so you find yourself rooting for all those teams that Nebraska was able to have success against in the Big Ten Conference, and they're going to continue to do so. But you're right, because this is the one thing that we continue to learn about in the new college basketball selection era. And when it comes to net rankings, is not only the quality of wins in the quad one, we know that that's huge, but also the committee is very favorable to going on the road. Now, this was the other thing that we were all going to wonder about when the Big Ten expanded, just like the SEC, the Big 12, all the expansion is that travel. How are you holding up when you're going out to multiple time zones, when you're going out to the West Coast? So you're out there. And I think they're going to react to that very favorably. And I think last night, and I know we'll get more into this game in detail too. Last night, in my opinion, was a complete synopsis of this team, of the things that sometimes can hurt them, but also what this team is truly capable of, and the fact that they still do have a bona fide superstar on their team in Bryce Williams. So there's a lot of different elements when you just look at Nebraska in a vacuum and say, I want to watch this team. What do my eyes tell me? I think there are a lot of attractive elements about them. But when you have the resume to go with it, and then make no mistake about it, that 6-game losing streak to show the ability to get off the snide and do so against a respected top 25 team like Illinois, even though maybe that stock is dwindling just a little bit, but then to go on the road and beat another top 25 team, and then a Washington team that was firing on all cylinders, and I mean firing on all cylinders in the first half. Those things, at least as of now, those are going to be very, very attractive when it does come to the Nebraska resume. Now, this is, as we talked about on Monday, this is that stretch of games, though, where you don't have so much to gain as opposed to as much as you have to lose. And that is obviously going to make a lot of people nervous.
Okay, so game last night. In the first 8 minutes of the game, Washington went 7 for 7 from 3. Do you know, or maybe you saw it posted on social media, what Washington's average for threes per game was going into last night?
It was average makes or just overall percentage?
Average makes of threes going into last night per game.
It was 6, wasn't it?
Is 6.6, and they had 7 on 7 attempts in the first 8 minutes.
Right.
Bonkers. And then Bearcade blocks one and they hit another one, and you're like, they're never going to miss.
Well, and then there was the one, Caleb, that literally hits off the buckle, goes straight up in the air, and then just finds itself in the cylinder too. You're thinking, oh, finally they get a stop. They clanked one, and it still goes in. You're thinking, my gosh. And this is what concerned me, is Nebraska having to chase those types of points early in the game. That is not their style. That is not an ideal situation for Nebraska, the way that they want to play.
Now, Washington, started 8 for 9 from deep, and then goes 1 for 7 the rest of the half. And Nebraska closes it to 10 points, starts out the second half on like a 15-2 run.
Yep.
And here's the part that is super interesting. So Washington went 1 for 7 to close the half from deep, 1 for 9 in the second half from deep. Nebraska has 1 turnover that entire half, and that was at the end of the game, letting the shot clock run out.
Right.
Nebraska had no actual turnovers in the second half. 49-25. Shot for the game 11 of 19 from deep. Like that you look at that and you go, Nebraska shot lights out from deep, but really Nebraska did just enough through the first half to stay in it, and then really took off. And it's like, you got to the end of the game and you go, I don't remember Nebraska being down 13 in the first half. Nebraska utterly dominated the second half of that basketball game in a way that you got to the end and you went, this isn't really kind of the same thing as the end of Oregon, where you're just like, no, Nebraska won this game. There's not really the anticipation of something going wrong.
Oh, and the thing that stood out to me more than anything about the way that Nebraska played, and you're right, because if you look at their numbers in the first half offensively, Nebraska's that is, they were right there, 5 of 10 beyond the arc in the first half. That's a great day at the office, especially for Nebraska. They were an exact 50% from the field, 13 of 26 in the first half. So you're right, offensively, they were pacing well. Now, could you shoot better from the field collectively? Yeah, sure. A lot of teams do. But here's the other thing that really, if you watch the end of the first half where Nebraska was actually getting stops, I don't know how you were feeling, and I know you guys were doing this live last night too, is you look at that game, even though you want to see them somehow get it into single digits before the half. You look at the way Washington was shooting for the first 17 minutes of that first half, and then they cooled down a little bit. They came back down to reality, only 56% beyond the arc and 53% from the field, which is still pretty damn good. But it was trending to be a lot better. I remember thinking to myself, man, Washington is going to be well into the 50s by the time we get to the break. There was about 3.5, maybe 4 minutes left, and I think they were sitting right around 42, 43 points. And you're thinking, man, they're going to be in the 50s. Like, can Nebraska keep pace with this? I just don't know if they can. And then they cooled down. I'm thinking as soon as they get to the break, I know it's a double-digit lead. It just doesn't seem like it is as much because there's no way Washington can shoot like this for 40 minutes. It's not going to happen. Now, the big question was, could Nebraska continue to pace at a consistent level in the second half? What I loved what they did, the sense of urgency by Fred Hoiberg and this team, the creativity, the motion away from the basketball on the offensive side, the back cuts. They were doing so many different things to get guys to the rim. They wasted no time. Maybe 5 to 10 seconds was coming off the shot clock. They were having quick possessions. They were finishing at the rim. And all of a sudden, in the blink of an eye, before Washington calls a timeout, it's a 2-point game. And Washington and everybody there rooting for the Huskies is thinking, what the hell just happened? Because it was just such a fast-paced offensive attack. And this was something that, quite frankly, I didn't know if Nebraska could do for a sustained amount of time, but they did exactly what they needed to do. They weren't settling for the 3 ball. They put up a couple of them, but they were getting everything to the rim. So they just chipped into that lead so quickly, but doing so by attacking the rim. That was an aggressiveness that we don't typically see from this team.
Especially when they start out down and a team coming out on fire. Usually that kind of just snowballs into the now it's kind of happening. Washington shoots 40% from 3. First team all season to shoot at least 40% from deep and lose to Nebraska. That had been kind of a magic line up until USC. USC obviously shot under that. All right, I will give tomorrow morning on the Nebrasketball Brunch Show with myself and Jack Mitchell at 11 a.m. right here on the Husker Max YouTube channel, as well as the I-80 Club YouTube channel, my confidence rating in this team getting back to the NCAA tournament. But Nick, for you, 3 in a row, and now sitting at 15-8 on the season, 8 regular season games to go, most likely playing themselves into the Big Ten tournament, so at least one more there. Where are you at on this team getting back to March Madness?
My confidence level from a 1 to a 10, 1 being the lowest, 10 being the highest, I'm putting it squarely at a 6.5.
Okay, yeah.
Because and it's funny, a week ago I was thinking 3, maybe.
Yeah.
Because you just, and this is still what remains to be seen with this team is when an opportunity presents itself from a favorable standpoint, when the matchup is favorable, we still need to see this team show up for 40 minutes consistently. Last night, that was a favorable matchup, and Nebraska withstood what was just a hellaciously hot Washington shooting attack. They withstood it. They did it on the road, and they were steady the entire game. And I think that stat you bring up, things that have hurt Nebraska when we've looked at that losing streak, the turnovers was a major thing. To have only really no turnovers, because I don't even count that at the end.
Right, exactly.
What happened? 6 total turnovers in that game. And then again, and you and I were talking about this before we came on the air, Asabor for Washington and Wilhelm Breidenbach. There was some size in there too. And Asabor, I swear, was getting away with everything when the whistles were being thrown around to everybody else. But this was going to be another test for Nebraska of what they could do on the boards. Not that Nebraska won the rebounding battle, but to be -1 in that situation, I think actually was a very good thing for this team. Now, as you mentioned, 11 from 19 beyond the arc. That's not something you should expect from Nebraska every night. But I think the fact that you can go to the bag and get that every now and then, you're starting to limit turnovers. And then again, I go back to the first part of the second half, that first 5-6 minute stretch, Nebraska was getting every rebound. They were limiting second opportunities for Washington as well. So a lot of those little things and just plain collectively smart basketball, just the way that they closed out against Illinois, just the way they closed out against Oregon. That was all really smart basketball. So those things going forward would lead you to believe, okay, favorable matchups, if you can just play the smart game and be aggressive when you have to, but more than anything, taking care of the basketball, these matchups that they have at home should serve them well. But that's the thing, should serve them well. If I knew more about this team or felt more confident about how they can handle the favorable matchups, I would be closer to an 8. At a 6.5 right now, because I think what they've done to get off the 6-game losing streak, I think they've built that confidence back. And I still am never going to undervalue the amount of maturity, the amount of experience that these guys have in this game collectively.
Big Ten Player of the Week, AP National Player of the Week, USBWA, Oscar Robertson National Player of the Week team, Bryce Williams, 23 points, hits 4 threes in the game, also has 4 assists, 2 rebounds. Juwan Gary, 17 points in 25 minutes because he had a couple of fouls in the first half. Connor Sejan goes 4 for 5 from deep, 16 points on the game. Nebraska back at home on Sunday. That will be I believe 1 o'clock tip. Yeah, 1 o'clock tip on Big Ten Network, and then home again next Thursday, 7:30 tip on the Big Ten Network.